Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, I will call into open session this meeting of the Arlington Independent School District Board of Trustees for October the 3rd, beginning at 7:10 p.m. I want to thank everybody who's here with us this evening. We will start our meeting with an open ceremony. Please join Ms. Fowler in leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please silence all cell phones and electronic devices to avoid disruptions around you. And now, if you would join me in a moment of silence. Thank you very much. The first item on our agenda is our program presentation this evening. Ms. Foster, please.
Good evening, President Mays, members of the board, Dr. Cavazos, to everyone here tonight and watching on the broadcast. This is one of our favorite times of the month, the first of the month, because we get to see a really fantastic student performance, and tonight will be no exception, right, guys? The Barnett Junior Varsity Treble Choir is with us tonight. They're a premier ensemble at Barnett Junior High, comprised of 2-year choir students, and these ladies perform all over the community. They've done the Arlington Education Foundation, retirement centers, and a lot of Arlington ISD sponsored events. They're under the direction of Kelly Talley, under the direction of Kelly Talley, hello. The ensemble consistently earns sweepstakes and placement into honor choirs in both UIL and TMEA events. Kelly Talley is in his 8th year of teaching at Barnett and in his 10th year overall. Mr. Talley's led the rapid success and growth of the Barnett Choral Department, along with the help of Associate Director Janine Craig in her 6th year at Barnett. Tonight, the group's going to perform You've Been on My Mind by Audrey Snyder. The piece deals with the emotions of losing someone that you love and honoring their memory. The Barnett Varsity Treble Choir wants to dedicate this performance to everyone who's loved and lost someone special in their lives.
Good job. Thank you very much. If I might add, while the young ladies are walking out, Mr. Talley, I remember when you first started with AISD, you're still here, you're still at Barnett. Thank you, you're still doing a great job. Thank you.
Good job.
Very well done.
Thank you, ladies. Okay, next on our agenda is our October 2019 Student of the Month. Arlington College and Career High School student, Gadir Alabidi. Mr. Boland, please, Dr. Boland, please, come to the microphone and introduce our Student of the Month.
President Mays, Dr. Cavazos, members of the board, thank you for this opportunity again to recognize some of the outstanding students in AISD, and I'm proud to announce the first ever in the history of Arlington College and Career High School Student of the Month. And before I talk about it, I'd like to thank some of the members of staff for coming out this evening. That's Counselor Joanne Franks, Assistant Principal Amy Cunningham, and our Security Officer, Officer Gallegos. We can hardly recognize, he's out of uniform this evening. It's my pleasure to announce the first Student of the Month in the history of our campus, Gadir Alabidi. Gadir is currently a freshman and attended Owsley Junior High. Gadir holds very high expectations for herself and wanted to attend ACCHS because of the opportunity to create the best possible future for her and her family. She isn't completely sure what she wants to do when she is older, but she is very interested in politics and law. Gadir was selected for this honor by her teachers, and here are a few of the things they had to say about her. Gadir is an excellent student who goes above and beyond daily. She is hardworking, determined, and shows a great deal of passion and enthusiasm for learning. She exhibits creative thinking and is always willing to help others. She is a joy to teach and an inspiration to her peers. We know she will one day become whatever she wants to be. Continue to be a leader and know that we are very proud of you and proud that you are an ACCHS Titan. So a little story about Gadir. During our summer bridge camp with students, I have a class with them and I give them a little quiz on people that are in the district, and the first person up there is Dr. Cavazos. And so I tell him, hey, if you ever see him on our campus, make sure that you introduce yourself, ask questions. He loves answering questions. And so first day of school, he came out, and what did Gadir do? She came right up to him, shook his hand, introduced herself, and I think she cornered him for about 20 minutes with questions, maybe not that long, but she had lots of questions, and then that turned into her becoming part of the AISD newscast, and so she just did her first newscast, and so I want to thank her for listening to me and taking my advice, first of all, and then just the enthusiasm she brings every day to our campus, and we're very proud of her, so congratulations, Gadir. Come on up.
Hi. It's crazy, isn't it? Who would have known? Nobody. I don't know. Am I supposed to say a little something? Can I?
Please, you may say a little something.
I'm an Owsley Panther, or I was. Loved the school to death. I met Dr. Cavazos last year, and I had the pleasure of speaking to him about my culture and who I was as a person. And now we're here. I decided to take, it was a big decision for me to transition from a regular high school to a early college for me because I'm an athlete and I love the social aspect of it. But coming here is like a life-changing experience. It's something I never thought I could, an opportunity I never thought I could have, you know? And to be able to, my mom came with me today, and to be able to do something more with my family and give something back to them is the biggest accomplishment I could do out of anything. And this school, this amazing school, for them to, the amount of support, the amount of love that they've given us to push on. Officer Gallegos last year, he made the biggest impact in me in coming to this school and gave me the courage and the strength to want to be here, you know? And I don't think I could have done it without them. And my teachers from Owsley, and just everybody being so supportive and, you know, kind. And, you know, it's crazy, because I didn't think, when he told me, they called me to the office, I was like, who? And then he tells me sit down. I'm like, what? I was like, what did I do? Because I'm not a bad kid, but I was just like, I must have done something. He calls me in there. He goes, you want student of the month? I was like, who now? What now? And he was like, student of the month. I was like, I don't know. But I feel really blessed and grateful and honored to be a part of any of this. And thank you so much for your time and for Dr. Bullen and the rest of the school for even noticing me, you know? Yeah, it's a great opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And just so you know, we do see you.
Good.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work. Yes, let's go. Good dear, we're going to come down and take a picture with you and Dr. Bullen.
You too, hog. My shell. Me too, you know. What's up, Spence? Me too, you know. It's just, oh, you know, it's just hard.
This is also to commemorate today and to congratulate you for being an outstanding representative of our students and a role model for many students. So congratulations, very well done. Give a round of applause.
I know, I'm part of you.
We just do the three, you guys.
I'll make it here.
Congratulations again. That's our Students of the Month. Okay, next on our agenda is our Community Engaged for Excellence Award for Appreciation. This evening, we will be awarding the Daughters of the American Revolution, Lucretia Council Cochran, Chapter NSDAR. Mr. Perales?
President Mays, Dr. Cavazos, members of the board. It's getting more and more difficult to have to present after the students. They set the bar so high, but I brought my backup team with me today, so they're gonna help me out here. And so I was sharing earlier today at a community event how blessed we are to have an opportunity to be a part of our students' lives, and we just saw a testimony of one of our students. And we are blessed also to be working in a learning community with such a great community support. And today, we recognize one of those groups that has been a cornerstone in Arlington for many, many years. I've had an opportunity to work directly with them over the last 6 years in this position and work with them for the previous 10 years as the role of a principal, as they directly impacted my students on my campus. But they were established in 1953. The Lucretia Council Cochran chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution is a volunteer women's service organization dedicated to promoting patriotism, preserving American history, and securing America's future through better education. Their objectives are realized through various programs and activities that directly impact the Arlington ISD learning community. Following the school year timeline, the DAR presents a program on flags to second grade students in celebration of Constitution Week in early September. This year, just in this past month, they've already delivered 9 presentations and affected over 1,000 students, and that's such a short amount of time. During the fall semester, the DAR encourages 5th through 12th grade students to enter their American history essay and their Christopher Columbus essay contests, and students have an opportunity to compete not just at the local level, but at the state level and at the national level as well. Come around in February, the DAR presents Good Citizenship Awards to students from AISD high schools. In the spring, the DAR presents the DAR Award for Good Citizenship to one 5th grade boy and one 5th grade girl in every AISD elementary school. And they also recognize our 8th grade students by recognizing one 8th grade boy and one 8th grade girl with the Outstanding Work in American History Award. And that's for every AISD junior high school. They also celebrate excellence in teaching. The DAR recognizes an outstanding AISD teacher of American history every year. Going beyond recognition initiatives, the DAR Community Classroom Committee works on various campus outreach programs. Members collaborate with selected schools to develop an individual plan to suit the school's specific needs. They customize their outreach for the school. Some examples of such outreach are supporting a shoe drive at Berry Elementary, a coat drive at South Davis Elementary, and making presentations on various topics at schools such as President's Day, Veterans Day, and Women's History. And over the past 4 years, they've outreached to our students by providing 10,000 books to Arlington schools. And so I had to write all this down because there's so much engagement, there's no way I could memorize it. And so with their commitment to supporting Arlington ISD, the Lucretia Council Cochran chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution is very deserving of the Community Engaged for Excellence Award of Appreciation. And at this time, it's my honor to ask Miss Elizabeth Patel, Regent, Chapter Regent, up to the podium.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us here. It is a great honor to be the regent of this chapter. I always tease them that we don't drink tea, we just put the shoes on and run. Because this week we're out, they've served 1,000 students already with the Betsy Ross program. And we'll be out next week visiting every fire department and police department in Arlington. So we bring goodies to them. But I would like to thank you all because last year when we did the Betsy Ross program, 2 of your schools sent us lovely thank you notes and did the big flags on it. Well, in November, we go out to visit all the veterans in the nursing homes. So those are put in the 150 bags we hand out, and that brought a smile to every one of those vets from those children. And we'd like to thank you for your participation. And that's all I have.
Very nice.
Thank you very much. We're going to come down and take a picture. I would like to say welcome past trustee and president of the board, Peter Barron. It is very nice to see you here with your wife. Okay, also Polly Walton, up here with our trustees, is also part of DR. So would you please like to come down and take a picture with us as well? Now put on your shoes and pass out shoes. Okay, so should I present this to you? Oh, sure. This is our Community Engaged for Excellence Award of Appreciation, presented to the Lucretia Council Cochran chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution for your service to Arlington ISD. Thank you very much.
Very nice. Thank you.
All right, so somehow we're going to take a picture.
We've got the squeeze. In front of the podium.
In front of the podium. Over here, right? Right there. You're perfect right here. How's that, Sven? No hiding, yeah.
Camera now. There we go. 1, 2, and one more. All right.
Got him into shape, huh? Thank you, I appreciate you. Thanks.
I know, it's gone. Okay, very nice, very nice. Next on our agenda are consideration for appointments. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mays. At this time, I'd like to recommend that the board ratify the appointments of the individuals discussed in closed session for Assistant Principal for Sam Houston High School and Assistant Principal for Atherton Elementary.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the administrative appointments as discussed in executive session? Dr. Reich,
Move to approve?
Ms. Fowler? I'll second. Okay, so we've got a motion by Dr. Reich, second by Ms. Fowler. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. All in attendance, vote in the affirmative. Thank you. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mays. It's my pleasure to present the new Assistant Principal for Sam Houston High School, Mr. Christopher Letson. Christopher attended Eastville College for Associate of Science in Business, Texas A&M University Commerce for Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, and Grand Canyon University for Master of Science in Special Education. Most recently, an English Language Learner Special Education Instructional Specialist in Dallas ISD, has been a special education teacher, coach in Mesquite ISD as well. Christopher, congratulations.
Greetings, President Mays, members of the board, Dr. Cavazos. Thank you for the opportunity to serve the students, the staff, and the community of Arlington ISD. Special thanks to Principal Villarreal for the opportunity to serve the students, the staff, and the community of Sam Houston High School. I am grateful for the chance to continue the success that this district has and the success in Sam Houston High School. I will be vigilant to pursue the academics of success at Sam Houston High School. I will have the opportunity to not just bring my talents, but learn from the people that's in Arlington ISD, and definitely be able to help the students pursue their dreams in the future. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce the new Assistant Principal for Atherton Elementary, Ms. Anna Crisostomo. Right? Yeah. Anna, come on up. Anna attended California State University in Sacramento for Bachelor of Science in Physical Education, UT Arlington for Master of Ed in Ed Leadership, most recently an instructional coach and an 8th grade science teacher in Fort Worth ISD, has taught 8th grade science and coached in several school districts, 6th grade through 8th grade ESL English, 7th grade Science, ESL Aid, and a K through 8 PE athletic coordinator, and has also been served in the U.S. Army. So, Anna, congratulations and welcome.
Thank you. I was waiting. This goes on and on. President Mays and the members of the board and Dr. Cavazos, thank you. I am so thankful to be here in front of you. It is such an honor to be joining the AISD team. I would like to thank my husband, Vincent Crisostomo. He has been by my side the entire career that I've had, and he has endured those forever long educational conversations that just keep on going, no matter where you are. So he is truly a keeper in my life. I'd also like to acknowledge my friends and my mentors that are unable to be here today. I've had many mentors, and they have all had parts in who I am and how I have become this far to be in front of you today. And I would like to acknowledge that and thank them. To all of my Atherton All-Stars, the ones that are here today, as well as those that are at home and enjoying themselves, I would just like to promise my All-Stars as well as AISD that I'm going to give my all. I am going to do everything in my power to ensure that I am serving our families and our faculty to excellence. And I also want to thank Ms. Golston and Ms. Kelly for being so awesome. They are so easy to join. And I am so excited to be part of the team and serve with them and learn with them. Thank you so very much.
So as is our custom here, we would ask for you to follow Mr. Kell out in the hall. We will come out and meet and greet with you. If everyone in the audience would please allow the board to go first so that we can return and take care of our business. Thank you very much. I now call this meeting back to order. Next on our agenda are open forum for agenda items. Ms. Benjamin, do we have any cards? No, ma'am, no cards. Thank you. Next on our agenda is an action item. That item is consider the resolution to nominate a candidate for the Tarrant Appraisal District Board of Directors. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mays. And at this time, we'd entertain a motion for this resolution.
Thank you, Ms. Mays. And before I make the motion, a couple of things about who we're going to include in this motion is Mr. Mike O'Donnell. Mr. O'Donnell, for everyone who knows, has served for this district for a long time. Graduate of this district from, I don't remember which elementary, but I know Hutchison and Sam. Carter Hutch Sam. Wait, Carter? Elementary? You went to Carter, then Hutch to Sam, that's right. You finally got here in junior high, that's right. That's where it came. Military detour. That's right, the military detour. And then Mr. O'Donnell served faithfully for this district, putting his children through these schools, and then also served 6 years as a trustee and as board president and served this district faithfully. After his time on this district, we had to have a new appointee to the Tarrant Appraisal District, and Mr. O'Donnell stepped up to serve on that. We always say we need someone in there that's really making sure the appraisal district's running efficiently. He's not doing the appraisals, so don't yell at him for those, because I think we all want to yell at those guys for those. But Mike is making sure operating systems and as an organization, they're running efficiently, which is a key factor for us to this. So with that, I move to approve the following resolution. Whereas the Arlington Independent School District taxing entity has determined its preference for the representative to the Board of Directors of the Tarrant Appraisal District. Now therefore be it resolved that the Arlington Independent School District Taxing Entity does hereby nominate Mike O'Donnell, 4001 Fairway Court, Arlington, Texas, 76013, as a member of the Board of Directors for the Tarrant Appraisal District, and that a copy of this resolution be mailed to Jeff Law, Chief Appraiser, Tarrant Appraisal District, 2500 Hanley, Edaville Road, Fort Worth, Texas, 76118, passed and approved by the Board of Trustees on this third day of October 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Hogg. Dr. Reich? You're back. There you go.
Second.
Right.
Good job.
He wasn't making up his mind. So we've got a motion by Mr. Hogg, a second by Dr. Reich. Are there any questions? Okay, no questions. Please vote. All present vote in the affirmative. Thank you very much. Once again, Mr. Donald, thank you very much for stepping up, and thank you for your service. Okay, next on our agenda are items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda. Are there any items to be withdrawn from the consent agenda? Okay. All right, so next on the agenda are our consent items. Ms. Powell.
President Mays, board members, Dr. Cavazos, we have donations on the agenda for your consideration this evening, and the donations presented this evening total $124,118, which brings our year-to-date total to $219,315. We also have 2 bids on the agenda. In both cases, the administration is recommending the low bids and the bids that represent the best value to the district.
Is there a motion to accept this consent agenda? Ms. Walton?
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Have a second?
I second.
We've got a motion by Ms. Walton, a second by Mr. Wilbanks. Are there any questions? Seeing none, please vote. All present vote in the affirmative. Thank you very much. So we now move to our discussion items. Dr. Cavazos?
Thank you, President Mays. And this evening, we'd like to bring some information about House Bill 3 and the implementation of some of the academic side. I'll kind of preface this as kind of a part of this journey. House Bill 3 was really a very transformative bill. There's a lot in House Bill 3. Our district has been working on district improvement plan like every year and campus improvement plans. And then a recent release of House Bill 3 information came. And there is some state now requirements that are very different for school districts and school boards as well. And so kind of the journey we're on, and Dr. Wirtz is going to describe that, but I'll just share ahead of time that we'll be coming back at several board meetings with information about House Bill 3. In fact, we will likely have addendums to our plans that the board will approve recently or soon will approve plans, but then in the spring we'll bring addendums because these requirements take effect this year, but for next, but they must be in the plans. There's a lot of compliance here, so that's also an important thing to note. As you know, that our philosophy and our operation is to go well beyond compliance, but the state has now managed a lot of this work, and so that's an important thing, I think, for the board to be familiar with and for us to plan accordingly. It will be a longer period of planning for this year, and that's another way of summarizing that. At this point, we'll turn it over to Dr. Wirtz so he can explain some of the details of this.
Right, thank you. Good evening, President Mays, members of the board, Dr. Cavazos. I'm here this evening to share with you some of the details that have recently been published from the Texas Education Agency regarding the implementation of House Bill 3. Like Dr. Cavazos had indicated, it's a complex bill that was recently passed in the 86th legislature, by the 86th legislature, and it really was an attempt to provide funding in a new way to improve achievement among many things. If I was to go through all components of House Bill 3, it would be a much longer presentation. Today, what I'm going to do is really zero in on a couple of components. What I wanted to do was start off by framing education in general across the country and how that's impacting Texas and what relationship that has to some of the things we're seeing come out of House Bill 3. So states across the country participate in something called the National Assessment of Education Progress, the NAEP. And what this assessment does is it measures student performance across specific grade level bands in content areas. And it looks for how well students are doing across the country and measures their achievement. We participate periodically in Arlington if we're selected, and they look specifically at reading achievement and math achievement. Those are often the most common ones that are actually cited: math and reading, science, and things like that. In the most recent NAEP data that was published in 2017, Texas was ranked 46 out of 50 states, which is 5 slots lower than it was in the 2015 assessment, specifically in reading proficiency for 4th grade. The Texas Commission on Public School Finance noted that only 58% of Texas students are actually coming to kindergarten ready. And in 2018, only 4 in 10 3rd grade students across the state were meeting the MEET standard in Texas reading assessment on STAR. So in an effort to have a significant impact, some of the work has been embedded into House Bill 3 to help drive some of that improvement across the state, and it impacts each of the districts, including Arlington. There are 4 major components part of House Bill 3. There is a component that supports teachers and rewards teacher excellence. There is increased funding, and there's also efforts to reduce and reform property taxes and recapture, which you all have talked about in the past. Tonight, what I'm going to specifically be focusing on is the area that's pertaining to learning and improving student outcomes. This area of the bill actually has several components. One focuses on prioritizing early literacy, including pre-K. You've heard us talk about full-day pre-K. Full-day pre-K and the funding source around 4-day pre-K for eligible 4-year-old children through an early education allotment is housed here in House Bill 3. They also established a dual language allotment, which provided funding sources for kids who participate in a dual language program. And this is due to the Commission on Public School Finance's findings in their research that dual language programs in a bilingual model is the model that actually produces the greatest results for students. And so students who participate in the dual language program who are native English speakers learning the second language or native Spanish speakers, for example, learning English, each of those 2 student groups receive portions of the money on the weighted allotment. This also requires school boards to adopt and monitor early childhood literacy mathematics proficiency plans and to ensure that we implement what is called a systematic phonics curriculum in the district. And it also requires school teachers and principals of all schools that teach kinder through 3rd grade to attend a reading academy and to be trained on the science of teaching reading. Tonight, in this presentation, I'm going to be focusing specifically on the last 2 bullets, which are about the literacy mathematics plans, and then also the requirement that teachers and principals participate in reading academies. A couple other components of this portion of the bill require school boards to adopt and monitor plans for college, career, and readiness in the district. It also incentivizes and provides additional rewards for school districts with bonuses for number of students who actually go beyond the threshold that they establish for CCMR graduates, which I'll explain here in a bit. They provide increased funding for college prep exams, and they also increase funding for mainstream special education, new dyslexia allotment, and then they also encourage teachers to receive training who serve autistic students. Tonight in our presentation, I will be focusing specifically on the top 2 bullets, which are focused on the plans to improve outcomes for college, career, and military readiness, and also how that's related to the bonus that districts can be eligible for CCMR graduates. Finally, the last 3 components of this portion of the House bill also provides funding for an optional extended school year for elementary schools and establishes a new summer learning program for CTE programming. We also will be receiving guidance actually next week on a new blended learning grant program that's coming out. And then there is additional funding to reimburse for students at 21 age or older who participate in high school equivalency exams. So there's a fee attached to that, and there's funding to actually pay for that. So tonight I'm going to talk specifically about the requirement regarding the board plans that have to be adopted. Back in 2015, the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board adopted a plan called the 60 by 30 Texas Plan. And in essence, what this states is that 60% of Texans who are the age 24 to 30 will either hold a post-secondary degree or a workforce certificate by the year 2030. The relationship between this and public education is that this House bill calls for 60% proficiency at the MEET standard at third grade reading. And when we say MEET standard, if you'll remember in Dr. Barlow's presentations, there's the approaches, meets, and masters. This specifically is looking for targets at the MEETS level, which is what's considered at the state level college ready. The focus is specifically on third grade reading due to the research that shows that students who actually are performing on grade level in third grade reading have higher rates of graduation and success and persistence in post-secondary education than students who do not. It also calls for students who move into post-secondary environments to not need remediation, meaning that they are actually being successful in their secondary and elementary instruction, so that when they do proceed into a post-secondary environment, that they are not needing to take remediation courses. So the goal is for no remediation, and also that they actually persist in one of three areas. That a student graduates from high school and then moves on to acquire an industry certification that allows them to have a livable income, to pursue their post-secondary education in a higher education environment, either in a community college or in a four-year university, and or enlist in the military. When it comes to House Bill 3, specifically around the bonus, these requirements are a little more stringent or higher than what we would even have in our typical accountability system. So for example, bonuses that are related to industry certs or CCMRs, students not only have to graduate, but by the 12th day of the following school year, there has to be indication that they have actually earned a certificate, or that they're in a post-secondary education program enrolled, or that they have not only passed the military readiness exam, but that they actually have enlisted. And I'll talk about that in a bit. So the School Finance Commission recommended that each public school district be required to establish a locally developed board goal related to these areas, and that their goal be reported out, that progress on our achievement towards that goal be reported out publicly each year, multiple times. And the goal should have metrics that allow us to disaggregate how students are doing in each of the different subgroups in relationship to these goals. The goals have to specifically address early childhood literacy, which is specifically looking at passing rates for third grade students, and mathematics, and also college and career and military readiness. For the third grade reading and math goals, the requirements are that the goal be an aggregate goal, so how all students do in third grade in terms of meeting standard, and then how individual student groups that are at least 25, a count of 25 or more, are also doing under the closing the gap domain. So in essence, you would receive, there would be one goal for all students, and then there would be sub-goals for each of the individual student groups to make sure that we were bringing all student groups along in a way that closed gaps. School districts can also choose to set goals for students who participate in bilingual or ESL programs. In our district right now, our area of that we are working to address is specifically around ESL. Our bilingual students are performing at the same level or better than our non-bilingual students. Our ESL program is where our students are most challenged. There's also a requirement for targeted professional development. So once goals are set at the campus and district level, if there are teachers in grades K through 3 that the board identifies as not meeting the plan goals, they are required to participate in targeted professional development. And that professional development can also take into consideration for bilingual or special education programs. With regards to college, career, and military readiness, it is similar to reading and math. There has to be an aggregate goal, and then there has to be goals for each of the student groups that have a student population of at least 25 students or more under the closing the gaps domain. One of the requirements, which I won't go into lots of detail tonight, but I will be coming back to share additional details when we share with you our district plan and our literacy plan that we're working on, is that all teachers and principals serving K-3 students are required to attend reading academies by the year 21-22. So, and the reading academies, there are two different models. They're still working on guidance, but they must be provided by an approved provider by the state. Providers will be announced in March, and the initial cohort for academies will begin next summer. Once these plans are drafted, they have to be coordinated, and state law requires that the coordination of these plans, the early childhood literacy, math, or the CCMR plans, have to be coordinated by a district level administrator or a person from Region 11, and it must contain these 5 components. There must be goal setting, evidence that stakeholders were engaged in the process, that it's implemented, and that an annual report be provided to the board regarding the progress towards those measures, and that be done in a public setting, and that we post annually on the district and campus websites those plans and our progress. The goals, the guidance around the goals indicate that they must be specific, quantifiable, and measurable goals. And it must have a 5-year target, so where we intend to land for our 3rd grade students' proficiency in literacy and math in 5 years, so by 2024, and annual progress points or targets that you're shooting in order to reach that goal. So for example, if you were at 40% and you wanted to increase by 10 points in 5 years, you would divide that by 5 and you'd have a target for each of those individual 5 years that would allow you to track your progress and pace towards reaching the goal at the 5-year point. The goal must contain a baseline, which is where we currently are. It must indicate a target where you want to be, the specific populations that you're trying to impact, and the month and year in which the current state that you're in will actually reach the future state that you want to be in 5 years. For literacy and math, the requirement is that it specifically be around 3rd grade reading and math STAR scores. That's where the law requires that we make a target. And it also requires that we leverage what are called integrated assessments to diagnose reading development in grades pre-K through 3. So in essence, what the tools we use in the district will be those that will be leveraged to help us guide and track progress of students in primary grades, so that when they get to 3rd grade, we know they're ready, and that we're tracking their meeting what we would call grade level expectations all along the way. And specifically, those are in pre-K through 2. For college, career, and military readiness, there's an opportunity for the district to receive what they call bonuses. And the way this works is they look at 3 specific populations. They look at economically disadvantaged, non-economically disadvantaged, and special education students. And what the state is doing is they're leveraging 2016, 2017 CCMR data. So what was the percentage of students that received a CCMR indicator in that school year across the state, and they're ranking all the districts and their scores from top to bottom. They will place the threshold at the 25th percentile for the first year, and then from that point forward, they'll have a stationary threshold. And for students, for districts who have the number of students that go beyond that threshold that meet the indicators in each of those 3 groups, will receive an additional bonus. So there is a certain dollar value that's attached to each one of those students that the district can actually receive if they have reached this threshold. The thing that's important to note about this is it's above what we would normally call an indicator for CCMRs for accountability. So for example, it not only is that you have passed SAT or ACT or TSI readiness tests, but you also have to have enrolled at the following school year by the 12th school day. You could be TSI ready, but if you are TSI ready and you're not going to college, you have to have earned or at least enrolled into an industry certification program by the 12th day of school the following year to qualify. And also, even if you've passed the military readiness exam, you must enlist in order to qualify for this bonus. So when we say CCMR indicators are going above and beyond that threshold, it's not simply whether you met readiness by TSIA standards test or ACT, or that you showed interest in attending the military. You must actually persist and enroll in those programs in order to receive credit. There is a progress monitoring requirement attached to these plans for the board. There must be a multi-year schedule articulating the timing of the goal and when those goal measures will be actually updated for the board. So we will establish a proposed schedule that we will share with you, and when it's approved, it will be posted so everyone knows exactly when progress updates will be coming. In the interim or annual reports, there must be an expression of what the outcome was and the progress along the way. The data, as much data as available, must be used to show how we are doing compared to previous reporting periods, and then how we're doing on the current reporting period and what relationship that has to the 5-year goal and annual targets. And then there must also include the superintendent's assessment of how well the district and campuses are performing, and leverage supporting evidence to show what our next steps will be in terms of our outcomes. In terms of website posting requirements, these are what they are. We must post the 5-year board outcome goals that include the annual targets, the specific targets for each of the subgroups where we're trying to close gaps, and progress measures. We also must post for each of the campuses on their campus websites the same type of plan, just at the campus level, which also includes applicable targets for each of the student groups. We must also include the specific actions that are being taken, so the plan, the actions that we're actually taking to improve the scores at the district and campus level, the monitoring calendar, and the updates that we provide to you periodically throughout the year. There is a requirement for school board training in connection to Senate Bill 1566, which is the evaluating the improvement of student outcomes training. Board members are required to do this every 2 years. What they are going to be doing is updating that training with new House Bill 3 requirements, so that as you go to your training every 2 years, the new requirements in terms of monitoring student performance will be embedded into that training. So our next steps as a district is we are beginning to develop our House Bill 3 plans. We actually anticipated this coming, and for us it was actually, there are some positive parts to this, because we knew that literacy was an area, for example, that we are working actively on here in Arlington. And so some of the outcomes and the funding sources that are coming from House Bill 3 actually will help us, which I'll explain in a second. So some of the process that we intend to go through is we will go through a needs assessment and a continuous improvement process to understand the gaps, looking at where we are now compared to where we want to be and what we believe are the actual drivers for why that achievement is happening the way that it is. Develop processes and strategies to actually improve in the area of 3rd grade reading and primary grade reading, so we can address those gaps, and then identify specific process and outcome measures so we can identify when parts of the system may be broken or need improvement, so that we can achieve our goals. And then what we will do is we will take the actions that are embedded from these plans and embed them into our district improvement plan. So as Dr. Cavazos indicated at the beginning of the presentation, what you will hear in the coming weeks are our goals and performance objectives for campuses and the district that we initially started. And then as we finish these plans for reading, mathematics, and college, career, and military readiness, we will embed those and bring those goals back to the board for updates into our DIP, so that it's all infused into our system as we go. There is some work we've actually started on this back in last spring. We had a literacy summit that took place over the summer. It included teachers across the district, principals, district level administrators, where we looked at our district-wide data, our student achievement specifically in literacy, and we conducted a literature review to understand what the research said was best practice to improve literacy outcomes when working with students. And we started the process of developing strategies that we have already initiated with our campuses now. So when I come back during the district improvement plan presentation at the next board meeting, I'll be able to share with you the details around the specific actions we're taking. Some of those things include professional development and training for principals around balanced literacy and best practices, establishing a culture of literacy at their campuses, and the relationship between those things and social emotional learning. We also have coaching, job-embedded coaching being provided to principals and teachers around best practices at scale and at specific targeted campuses. And then we have continuous learning sessions that we're providing as we begin the process of fine-tuning and reteaching balanced literacy components across our district. This just gives you a sense of the cadence of meetings that we're going to have, like how it's going to flow in terms of what we'll bring to you. Today, I'm here talking specifically around House Bill 3 requirements connected to these plans. At the next board meeting, we will share with you the initial district improvement plan goals and performance objectives and the targeted improvement plans for the identified campuses that Dr. Brown shared with you at a prior meeting. On November 7th, we will return and show you the initial campus improvement plans, including their goals and performance objectives. And then in early spring, as Dr. Cavazos indicated, I'll return and we will share with you our final drafts of the early childhood literacy and CCMR plans and any addendums that we might bring to the DIP or CIPs. So with that being said, I'll entertain any questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wirt. Are there any questions from board members? Dr. Reich.
Thank you, President Mays. Thank you, Dr. Wirtz, for the information. I'm just a little bit curious. Could you expand on the funding that we've received and where that is complementary to the plan here? And maybe this is a little bit down into the weeds, but I'm curious, will it cover the reading, the literacy development for the teachers or not?
I'm gonna probably ask Cindy if she can answer whether it's gonna cover it or not. I will say that the funding structure of House Bill 3 doesn't necessarily yield a bunch more money. It
Right.
just directs a little bit more about how we spend it. The allotments, there are certain the funding structure, for example, around comp ed and other areas have changed, but the allotments have been added through House Bill 3 that require us to spend around certain thresholds around specific things. For example, dyslexia, there's a new allotment there that requires that money, 55% of it be spent directly around dyslexia. So whether we have the funding source that will cover everything, I think I'll let Cindy answer that question.
And before she comes up to address that, specifically with the Reading Academy, I know we're going to get more briefing on it, but what does that look like as far as extra time for that PD?
So they haven't provided that completely yet. All they've said to us is that they're working on it, and we have some idea. So literacy academies have actually been going on for quite some time in the state. They have a traditional academy right now that's cohorted, and teachers in the current model receive 5 days of initial training in the summer in a cohort. They receive every other month, they'll receive job-embedded coaching from their facilitator, and then the opposite months, it's 2 more days of training, and then there's a capstone training of 3 or 4 days at the end of the year, so it's a year-long process. That's one model. The other model they're considering is actually a blended model, which allows for teachers to primarily do their learning online by learning and then uploading evidence of their learning and the application of their learning into the system, so to where they can actually qualify for having taken the training. The interesting thing about the blended that they're proposing is that it allows for a teacher to test out of components that they already are proficient in, so they're not having to relearn things that they already know and do well in the classroom. So we don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet. That's just what they've shared. There is a big cost difference between the two. Right now, I think the estimated cost for each teacher related to the blending they're thinking is like $300 to $500 per teacher, and the cost for the face-to-face, I want to say, is anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000. So it really, there's a huge variance in terms of price, which is getting to your initial question. The structure they're still providing that. The other thing I can add to that is it must come, like I was saying earlier, from an approved provider by the state, and then once that provider is announced in March, then the first initial cohort of teachers can begin in the spring. We have 2 years to have every teacher and principal who interacts or teaches K through 3 students to be trained. The other thing that's important to note is we have some teachers that participated in reading academies in the past. Unless they participated in the most recent reading academy that has what they call READ in it. It's like a specific component of their training. They are not allowed to count their prior training as counting. They'll have to redo it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's not an allotment that is specific to cover the cost of the academies, okay? I think the intention is that the formulas, you are supposed to pay for the academies through the funding we're getting in other formulas, such as the early ed allotment would be an example. In terms of, I think you also asked about the allotment for the non-limited English proficient students who are in a bilingual setting for like dual language. That's already factored into our budget, and it's about $300,000, and that's based on our understanding of the definition of who qualifies and how we've counted that up. That was our first stab at it. In terms of the CCMR bonuses, you heard Dr. Wirtz talk about these thresholds, these percentage thresholds on performance, and then students who have performed above that threshold are eligible for these allotments. For, let me look here, I wrote this down. Economically disadvantaged students that qualify for a bonus, that's $5,000 for each student. Non-economically disadvantaged students who qualify for the bonus is $3,000. And then a special ed student who graduates and meets the CCMR requirements gets another $2,000 on top of either that $5,000 or that $3,000 amount. And then we are required to spend 55% of that total dollar amount for things that will further improve and increase the CCMR outcomes. And so that piece of it, the state had not set the thresholds initially, and there were no rules about, there was not enough information initially for us to even take a stab at what those bonuses might be as part of our original budget this year. And I think my understanding is that that money may start to flow next spring, late next spring. So, yeah.
And I guess that leads to another question, which might be you, on the projection, what that might look like based on what our current year looks like, or past year looked like with CCMR.
Meaning?
As far as the disaggregated down to those different subgroups, are you able to kind of sort of extrapolate what that might look like in dollars?
We haven't looked that far yet.
Okay.
So TEA is sending out guidance every week or every 2 weeks around this bill. It's so robust. The bill is so robust that they have even videos that they put out called House Bill 3 and 30, basically. So basically these individual videos that are like 30 minutes long and memos that tell you how to like do each of these components of the bill. We haven't received all of them yet, so we're still receiving them. I have watched and read all of them pertaining to CCMRs, but we have not had Kevin, for example, dig into our data to see how many would actually qualify for the bonus. And the reason being is because they haven't set the thresholds yet. So we don't even know what the state threshold is. And if you go through the information the state's provided us to date, they give you an arbitrary number to teach you how it would be calculated, but they haven't actually set the target, so it's not possible for us to actually model it yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That's all I have at this time. Appreciate it.
If I could interject, Dr. Reich, because there's a lot to this. Just to give a context, this presentation today was really mapped out to be our district improvement plan. Originally, that's how we scheduled it. But about 10 days ago, they released this information from the state. And I think it's important to note the pictures, if you will, on the PowerPoint is the only local flavor of this. This is really state-driven. These are the strings of HB3, if you will, right? And so there was a lot of discussion about HB3 and what it would do and how they would tie different things to it. But this is now the requirement. And the challenge for a district like ours is that we have a strategic plan and we have things in motion and we have a certain trajectory in our district. And this is an insertion to that. Not bad things necessarily. It's all relative, right? But it's an insertion of this is now you have academies, now every teacher, now this has to happen, now the board has to do this and the board has to do that. And so that's the big picture context. This is one portion of what they've released, right? But it's an important one. It will be complicated and challenging to implement something of this type of compliance, because it is heavy on the compliance side, heavy on the management side of how you do this, not just what you do, but exactly how you do it and what you bring to the board. And so it's a shift in even our campus plans and district plan and things like that, that it's kind of right in the middle of our strategic plan, right? So that's a challenge. And again, Stephen and his team have been working on it, but it's the unfolding. Every 10 days or so, we have another release of the implications of HB3, and this is an example of that.
Thank you, Dr. Reich, and thank you, Dr. Cavazos. Ms. Walton. There you go.
Thank you, President Mays. This just kind of seems to be quite a shift in what is expected of school board members. For the last years, we've been mainly dealing with policy and strategic planning and budgeting and that sort of thing. And now I'm feeling like I'm going to, as a board member, going to be held responsible for student improvement. And you're saying yes?
Yeah, so in essence, the law now requires the board to receive progress updates on how students are achieving specifically in this area, and it dictates specifically what data to show and how to show it. So in essence, we're required to share with the board on a routine basis, according to a calendar, how we're progressing towards meeting our targets. I would say that's something we would try to do anyways.
Yeah.
I feel like one thing that I would say about us in Arlington is we try to show routinely how we're doing. We brought back multiple progress reports or updates connect to the strategic plan. I think right now the state has an expectation that members of a governance body like the board, for example, across the state be actively engaged in the student outcomes that school districts are actually experiencing, and this might be one way of legislating that.
If I may, the other challenge that we routinely deal with, and we've discussed it as a team, there's over 1,200 school districts. And this is aiming at all of them at a certain level of compliance and management. And we know that when that happens, it doesn't happen very well all the time, because there's districts that are way ahead of this, that are focused on this, but in different ways. I think Cindy, you covered, or Ms. Powell, you covered the HB3 money for full day pre-K. This is really where this is actually the strings are coming from, if you will. The requirements and all that is because full day pre-K was funded, then here are all the requirements that deal with early education, including reading academies that are required for teachers and principals, and these things that the board must do and things like that. But again, it's trying to cover all the districts with one compliance way, which doesn't meet all the needs.
Yes, I agree. I agree. I can see that will be pretty tricky to do. We're very different than other districts in size or in population or whatever. So, my mind is just kind of blown, because I have a hard enough time staying out of management anyway. And this is just saying to me, in my control freak mind, that I need to get on the ball. And, I'm really having a hard time, Dr. Wertz. I'm going to need some help from everybody. Well, thank you for this report.
Thank you, Ms. Walton, for your honesty. Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. Ms. Fowler.
Thank you, President Mays. What will be the ramifications for principals or teachers that don't undergo the training?
That's a good question. I don't have any guidance specifically on what it is. What typically it says is that schools who aren't in compliance or individuals that are not in compliance, you have to create an action plan for improvement. There are specific things that I'll share in the next presentation that the school district has to certify that we do. For example, we have to certify that we have a curriculum. We have to certify that we have strategy to place highly effective reading teachers in front of students. Right now, that certification is going to be in the form of a survey that we have to fill out. So if we don't meet the requirements or we can't certify all the components, then what their guidance right now is that you would have to create some plan that you have to submit to improve. That's pretty much what they usually will do. I'm assuming it will be very similar.
Okay, thank you. And one other question. If teachers transfer into our district, the training they received in other districts, will they be exempt coming into ours, or do they have to do additional training?
That's a good question. I'm going to say my assumption is yes. It's not based upon what district you're in. It's did you participate and receive the training? So for another example that I didn't bring up tonight, but will come out up in the next presentation, is there is new certification requirements now for teachers, for all incoming teachers that are new to the profession. They'll have a standalone reading assessment test that they have to take that actually covers the science of teaching reading. And so teachers who teach students pretty much through 8th grade ELAR, or primary grades, regardless of what subject you're in, will be required to pass that exam as a separate exam to be a teacher. So yeah, I don't think, just like that, I think it's probably based upon if you can certify that you've actually met the requirement regardless of which system you're in when you did it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Wertz.
Thank you, Ms. Fallow. Mr. Hogg?
Thank you, President Mays. I love the legislature when they totally ignore local control on everything they're doing. So HB 3 has some positives, and then there's a lot of other things. Dr. Wertz, you're our Chief Academic Officer. We have a very set, as Dr. Cavasso said, strategic plan. We think we're on the trajectory of making the right achievements. Do these things in here help us?
I actually think they do, to be truthful.
Good.
We, as Dr. Cavazos indicated, we started our process of improving literacy instruction in our district. Even back in the spring, we already knew that was going to be our focus area for the next several years because our own data tells us that was an issue. So the good thing about this is there are things about this bill that we can actually take advantage of to help us to accomplish our goal, and the literacy academies are actually one of them. We know that if you want a student to do well in reading, they need a master reading teacher in front of them. That's going to have the strongest impact on a student's ability to learn to read. Well, in order to ensure that there's a master reading teacher in front of every student, there has to be meaningful, research-based professional learning provided to all teachers so they can apply that skill set in their classroom. If you don't have an academy, then you have to create that yourself. So there are ways for us to leverage best practice that's actually coming from the state and infuse that into our plan so we don't duplicate effort and we don't overburden a teacher. So rather than us having teachers go through all this independent training to teach them all the components of literacy or the science of teaching reading, we can now leverage this requirement. And since everyone has to use that anyway, go to the academy anyway, we can embed that into our plan as part of our process. So there are some benefits. The other thing I would say too is any plan that's strategically designed to improve a student's outcome to be a better reader, in essence, it's a good thing.
Yeah. The complication is not what is being focused on, it's how.
Yeah.
So the how is where the compliance driven and the punitive, in some cases in nature with some of this, because we'll continue these presentations and you'll see how things become more punitive if they don't happen in certain ways. It's really the how.
That's right.
And the mandates from the state. When there's little differentiation, that always becomes an issue because we have talented and skilled teachers who are achieving well. But everybody has to go through a requirement. That's when we start seeing that lack of differentiation begins to affect implementation. What the state's focused on is not bad. I remember in the feedback loops that I was able to provide to some of our delegation and also to leadership in the state, I often ask them to, yes, the focus, if this is a new focus, which we all agree is an important focus, we should also spend time understanding what no longer is a focus. or what no longer is a priority in the state, so that there's an alignment. For example, end of course tests that have been around, but is that still a priority? All those end of course tests, not just the ones for graduation. And things like that. When do we inventory as a state the things that no longer, if these are new priorities, then what are no longer priorities? And that's what the dilemma with the state is, new priorities over old priorities, and the priorities continue. And so we have, I think Dr. Wertz did this the other week, where all the requirements that have to be in a district improvement plan becoming a compliance document, and so those are the things. It's the how that complicates things. The what is not off focus, it's just the how.
That's right.
Thank you, Dr. Vassos. And Dr. Wertz, on this teacher training and things that are having to occur, I'm assuming those are going to occur during in-service days?
So we don't know the specifics yet. That gets down to what Dr. Vassos was saying. It's complicated. Depends on which models they actually come out with, who the providers are, and when that's offered. If it's blended and it's online, that presents one way of accomplishing it. If it's face-to-face, that's different. So we just don't have that information yet. I don't think guidance on actual academies will be finalized and come out until the spring.
Yeah, I mean, time training, but also then on those things, and following up on Ms. Fowler's question, so if a teacher comes in from another district, is that teacher required to carry that documentation with their certification? Is there any kind of, because every teacher in the state has to have this,
right,
is there any kind of state clearinghouse? Like, does that get looped onto their teacher certificate, or is each district required to maintain that document?
Question I don't know the answer to yet. Yeah.
That's one of those HR questions, Mr. Kale, that other people don't think about, of who's holding on.
I don't know if it'll be that, or the district has to simply certify their teachers have attended. We haven't received that guidance yet. I'm sure that will come.
And Ms. Powell, I would ask you and Dr. Wertz, while we did receive funding from HB3, I have a feeling some of these things could possibly go into the unfunded mandate portion of our list that our legislators are always so happy to receive. Not that they do much about it, but they're still happy to receive it. And as we always say, not all unfunded mandates are a bad thing. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. But I would ask us to make sure we're documenting, because I do think this entire board and most knowledgeable trustees in the state have concern over long-term funding, especially for HB3. It's great. It's good political fodder. Hopefully it gets those people elected again. That's what they think. There's some good things in HB3, but I think we do have concern of what's the, hopefully not just 2-year, but really the 4-year funding mechanism of HB3, because I think the first dip from the comptroller, they start having panic, and guess who gets the cut? So I would ask us to, Dr. Wertz, from your side, when y'all are implementing these things, please make sure we're tracking cost for implementing these things, even little things such as a clearinghouse and housing documents, those type of things. Those are the types of things we need to be tracking unfunded mandates to show the state, you added these rules, here's the cost, and here's where this bit of funding for HB3 went to on these allocations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hogg. Dr. Reich.
Thank you, President Mays. Just had a follow-up question, and thank you, Mr. Hogg, for stating that. That's why I was asking those questions earlier, because that's what I see, is this is leading to unfunded mandate. With regard to these things that are being passed down to us, and I know I've asked this type of thing before, is there any work on the TEA side to have a prospective review, stakeholder input ahead of putting these things out? Probably not. Is there a mechanism for retrospective analysis, or is it essentially us contacting Morath or the TEA and saying, hey, here's our issue as this one district out of 1,200. Please maybe consider talking to the other 1,199 districts. And then the follow-up to that is, once these are put out as, I guess, regulation as it is, will it take legislation to fix it, or does the TEA retain the regulatory autonomy to adjust it if they so choose?
Do you want me to answer?
So most of these things, and again, it's an early release, and there's another level of presentation that's coming also in the future with math and CCMR. But most of this is in law. And what's not in law becomes something that is by commissioner's rules. Commissioner's rules do have an input time, if you will, where people can provide input. But most of this is in law, and that's how it was designed. And it again, it's tied to the funding. So because you receive this funding, you have to do these things. And again, nobody says that literacy is not an important focus. In fact, it is. But it's the how and trying to do that from a state level for all districts and for all school boards becomes very challenging because districts are at different levels. And so we are in kind of a new phase with our consultants in terms of monitoring the rulemaking process, because the rulemaking process has had a lot of effect, including, you know, the forced failures, where a campus actually received a grade that is a passing, if you will, grade, but because they missed certain domains, they're required to be failures. And things like that. That's in rulemaking. That wasn't part of the law. Right. So our consultants now with Cindy and others they're monitoring the rulemaking process, because that's where we're seeing that there's variations even from what was intended. So that's the work.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's what I see with this is these things are law. They're legislated, but then the punitive side and the interpretation of it, that's where I see us potentially getting on the hook even more in situations. Thank you. Exciting roads ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Reich. Ms. Walton.
Thank you, Ms. Mays. Just one other thing occurred to me. How does this impact our active learning cycle program that's been going on for 3 years now?
Right. It doesn't impact it any way than we were already anticipating in terms of focus on reading. Instruction's good instruction. It's the science of teaching reading is embedded in the balanced literacy framework, which we adopt for teaching reading. So our task as a district that we've been working on is overlapping those two frameworks and helping a teacher in the classroom who teaches reading understand how to implement the balanced literacy framework, and if they are implementing active learning cycle in the classroom, because they're one of the implementing classrooms as we roll it out, where that falls in and how that applies. So we wouldn't change that structure or the direction we were going. It's not implicated by this bill at all.
So we're still rolling out active learning cycle as voluntary to teachers, is that correct? Or
well, the schools come online, and when a school comes online or they're initiating their implementation at their school, we always encourage the principals to identify teachers who are interested in wanting to get started. But there is they have about 3 years for the whole school to come on board. It's not a voluntary framework that some will do and some won't do. Our goal is that all teachers implement active learning cycle by the last schools will come online in 2026. So it's a slow, responsible rollout. And when a school starts, they start usually with early adopters or teachers who are interested, and then it slowly builds from that point.
So when they first begin, teachers do have kind of an option whether they jump in at the very beginning or they kind of...
Yeah, some teacher, so for example, if a school is initiating their implementation and a teacher wants to wait until year 2 or 3 because they want to see how it goes, they want to learn, they don't necessarily have to be the first one. Usually, what we always encourage principals is to identify early adopters in your school who can help you as you roll it out in your building, because teachers will need to learn from each other and see it modeled and coached and things like that.
Yeah, encourage teacher leaders to get involved early. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Walton. Mr. Chapa.
Thank you, President Mays. I have a question about some of the language that's used in here, and maybe you're pulling it directly from HB3 itself, but what is a systematic phonics curriculum,
So it's a curriculum that focuses specifically on phonics, where it's delivered specifically outlined in the curriculum, so many days, so much time with a level of routineness. So, and they talk about that specifically in their video, which is they're not looking for a school district or a teacher to periodically implement phonics instruction in the classroom. And the reason being is because the majority of students who struggle with reading, that is their issue. Reading is really made up of two components: language comprehension and word recognition. And students who struggle in reading most typically struggle because they struggle at stringing sounds together, attaching those sounds and creating words, and then understanding how those words string together to create sentences and then comprehend them. So it's a systematic rollout. It's in the curriculum, it's articulated when, how much time, and it's routine.
Is that something that districts are not doing already?
I don't know if other districts are doing it. Most districts have it in their curriculum when you're teaching. For example, in our recent reading adoption, our literacy adoption, balanced literacy is the framework with which that adoption was actually created, and so there's instruction embedded right in there. But I couldn't speak for other districts, but it is a core part of quality reading instruction. And the omission of word work or word study in primary grade reading, for example, is a very significant omission in a reading instruction. Yeah.
So this is something we're already doing?
Yeah.
I had a couple questions about that, and you didn't highlight these, but I just had questions about what these types of additional assistance might be. But there was one bullet point that talked about increased funding for college prep exams, industry certification exams, on and on. But the last one was funding for innovative high school models designed to help students graduate with an associate's degree. Can you expand a little bit more about what funding?
So there is a new model that allows for certain high schools where you could actually, it would be almost like a 6-year program where students graduate with a high school degree, work on an associate's degree, and then they persist into the workforce to earn a workforce cert the next 2 years. So by the time they finish, they can do all 3 things. It's brand new. I don't have a lot of details on it. I've watched the information that's recently been published about it, but it's intended to give kids a trajectory that persists past high school and allow them to accomplish all 3 things in a 6-year period.
Interesting. Can you, and this is the very next slide point, there's more funding for an optional extended year for elementary school and a new summer learning program focused on CTE. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So there is additional funding. The information about the elementary, there's funding now that allows for us to extend the number of days that students in elementary school go to school. So I believe it's for 30 half days. And so we can leverage that funding to have a summer period where kids go to school longer for 30 days. Some districts are actually, it was brought up in the information provided by the state, are actually considering altering some of their school days so that students are engaged in academic content for shorter periods of time in elementary school per day, but they go for longer parts of the year. But that's just, right now, hypothetical examples that the commissioner is providing in his presentation. So that's what that is. It's just additional funding for extended time specifically for elementary. For CTE, there's specialized money for CTE programs that allow for students to engage in like workforce internships and prep programs in the summer that are related to concurrent sequence of courses and outcomes in the CTE program. So that's additional money that's there for that.
Okay. Yeah. How does the switch to minutes for the school day, how the school year is calculated, work with that extended option for elementary?
So that was a question that was brought up at the webinar that both Cindy and I listened to last week. This commissioner didn't have an answer for that. It was one that was actually posed, which is, are we talking days or are we talking minutes? And I think there were actually several school districts that posed that question, but he didn't have a concrete answer on the webinar for that specific one.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you have any?
I actually have information.
Oh, there you go.
So as part of a committee I serve on with TEA and TASBO, we actually are previewing some of the House Bill in 30 videos for TEA, and that was actually the one that we previewed today. And they're very clear to say the statute says you have to meet both the minimum minute requirements and you have to go 180 days in the regular school year before you can even tap into these extra 30 days. So that question was asked 3 or 4 times, and they were very clear that's in statute.
So is that something basically to incentivize going to a year-round program?
Actually, and even in that commissioner's session we sat in last week, that was really what he was kind of pressing is this really is intended to be 200, it's to extend the school year to the full amount. That's really what they're after, 210 days.
That's the primary example he kept pushing, or at least articulating. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, that's interesting. I'll go on to another slide.
What's not clear is there enough funding for all districts to do this? And how do you sustain that type of funding? And is this going to be a grant, or is this going to be an application, or you just draw the money down? But at some point, how do you sustain this funding? And that's really the
Right, and then how does it work if you have a large district like us, and then we've got, how do we pay teachers to work a almost full year when they're used to working not a full year, and all sorts of things like that. Keep the buildings open, the utilities, and so, it seems to be a theme of good intentions, but the how is very problematic. This is the slide on the requirements, and I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. So we will be required to ensure targeted professional development for K-3 teachers that the board identifies as not meeting the plan goals.
So the language that was provided from TEA specifically, those were their words. I pretty much quoted it. It doesn't articulate the district. It says specifically that the board identifies as not meeting the plan goals. How that looks, what that looks in practice, I don't really know, whether it's just recommendation from district. It's interesting because the example that they align, if you look at the slide itself that they provide, they talk about specialized training, and then they draw a line to reading academies. The challenge is that the word that they provide, the words that they actually use, which is specialized training intended for people who aren't meeting the plan requirements, insinuates that everybody else doesn't have to go to the reading academies, but the law clearly states that everybody has to. So I'm not sure that the actual alignment of this, what I stated here, is connected to reading academies. Everybody has to go to reading academies. What the way I'm interpreting or reading it is that if we set goals and targets and teachers all attend the reading academies, but there are classrooms that persist to underperform from what we're expecting, the district will be required to provide additional training and support to those teachers so their students can perform.
Okay, and how would we identify those teachers that are underperforming?
That's the part that we haven't landed on yet. My assumption is going to be based upon each of the campus individual targets and goals. So at the district level, we'll have a 5-year target with individual benchmark years and sub-pop goals, and every campus will also have the same. And so where campuses are failing to meet their initial targets, then we will have to dig into the data to see where is the gaps actually occurring, which classrooms is that happening in, where can we support and provide strength where help is needed, and where is high performance happening, how can some of those practices be replicated.
So is the data going to consist of STAR test scores, CAs, some sort of district benchmark metrics?
The statute requires that we report only on literacy and math in 3rd grade. The recommendation and best practice is that you also have interim progress measures in primary grades to track progress for kids along the way. But in reference specifically to the statute, it is 3rd grade reading.
Okay.
with STAR tests.
STAR, that's correct.
Okay, and this is my, I think it's my last question. On the reading, this is again on the reading academies, and I know a lot is up in the air on that. You mentioned, though, that one model of reading academy that's available now is during this, it starts at least during this summer.
That's correct.
Is that true for the other model as well?
They haven't actually developed the other model yet. They just propose that that's what they're working on. They give everybody 2 examples. One is already in place, which is the face-to-face that starts in the summer, and then the blended is what there is an online module-based program. That actually isn't happening yet. They're actually they'll be developing that through vendors, I believe. So I don't know when it will start. Well, actually, they did provide guidance. I correct myself. They did provide guidance and say that they will allow new teachers to enroll every quarter. So if a teacher doesn't enroll in the summer, there'll be an opportunity in the fall, then there'll be an opportunity in the spring. So there'll be an ongoing rolling admission in cohorts that can participate every quarter.
So, but you said that the summer training is several days long. Did you say 5 days?
It is.
So what would we do with a teacher that needs to enroll in a cohort that starts doing a quarter that's during the school year? Would they presumably be out of their classroom during that time?
If they went face-to-face and it was all face-to-face, then that would impact classroom time.
And so how many days total are these reading academies?
Right now, the one that's currently in place, the model that they showed is, I want to say it's 5. I think it was like 13 days total. 11 or 13 days. Maybe it was 11 days. Yeah. That's the current one that starts in the summer and goes through the course of the year.
And I assume there's been no guidance at all on how we're going to ask teachers to work 13 more days with, I presume, no additional compensation.
Well, my assumption is based on the model they have now, it's not additional work days except for the ones in the summer. And I do believe that there has been traditionally a stipend attached to participation in the literacy academies. They send information to a district and the district distributes the money, but I'm not sure that requirement or that is actually allowable as part of this bill. They expect it to be funded out of the House bill funding.
Okay, so does that stipend come from local district funds or from the state?
No, any monies that are funded right now, I believe, come directly from our ADA, what we receive as part of local budget.
Okay. And I was wrong, that was not my last question.
Okay.
My last question is, on the CCMR readiness, you said that there's gonna be an increased focus on verifying enrollment.
Say that again?
Verifying enrollment or enlistment.
That's right.
You know, we just came out of, and Dr. Barlow talked about this last year, but we came out of a situation with TEA where we lost credit for students that we should have received credit for once they left the district and showed up in college, and there was certain data that wasn't reported, and it hurt us, and had that data been reported, but it made a meaningful difference for our accountability rating. Has there been any discussion on how we verify whether a student enrolled, what counts, how long do they have to be there, how do we verify enlistment, what happens if a kid, you know, keeps working in the job that they've had during the school year for, you know, another year or two until they can, maybe they're helping their family and then they go and get a different job. How do we track that?
Right, so these are all, I think, persistent challenges that we have. Right now, what TEA is saying that they will leverage is national clearinghouse data to help confirm that kids that enroll in post-secondary education, the actual acquisition of workforce certs, and then actually working with the military to identify who physically enlists. Right now, we're not aware of how to access the enlistment data from the military. They don't release it to us. TA's indicated they are actually going to acquire it. So I'm not really sure how that's happening, but that's what they indicated in their training.
Okay.
Just real quick to Dr. Rice's point and other points that have been made, there's even discussion about rulemaking, back to that the TEA would set cut points for the ASVAB scores that are beyond what is required to even enter, and start tracking that way.
So to be military ready would require being more military ready than the military would require a student to be.
Or some variation that would be set by the state.
That's right.
In terms of ASVAB scores, which again,
sounds like an appropriate role for the TEA.
They have thresholds for ACT, SAT, TSIA, and also ASVAB that they're setting that will be counted as what's considered college ready or military ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dr. Wirtz, and I've said this before, and I understand now why we have so many doctors around here trying to figure this out, and I know that there's more guidance that'll be coming, more presentations, and I look forward to working with y'all and trying to figure out the things we're going to have to work out to that make a big difference for us that we currently don't have any guidance or answers to. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chapa. Thank you, Dr. Wirtz. I have just two questions. One, if I were to summarize a lot of what you've said, would it be correct for me to say there could be districts that are at a 10 currently? If we start following these rules, could that mean we actually go to a 7 to then follow the rules, to then move forward again?
What do you mean by 7 and 10?
On a scale of 1 to 10, if we're at a 10, before we have to incorporate, however this really turns out to be, is it possible that we could move back to a 7 to meet what we're required to do
Yeah.
versus what we're already doing?
I don't think, I don't believe, from what I know so far, that the impact will be negative in the classroom outside of potentially, based on what Dr. Cavazos said, in terms of implementation, we don't know yet. So I don't know how much time teachers will be required out of their classroom, which could impact achievement. Training is always great, but even as a district, we're constantly thinking about how often are we asking teachers to be away from students, because we know every day a teacher's away from a student is a day lost instruction. So that there's a potential impact there that could be there. But in terms of practice, our practice, we get to decide the practices that we're leveraging to improve our outcomes. And we have a pretty good idea of the things that we know we want to do for literacy, and we've already started that process. So I anticipate our student results will improve regardless. The way we choose to roll it out is the key to make sure that we don't impact what happens in the classroom by removing teachers from the presence of their students. Yeah.
And then my other question is pushing this information down to our teachers and making sure that they're understanding what's actually being guided out of this House bill and what the expectations will be for their role.
Right. So I'll be working with Anita in the communications department to make sure that we share that information. We've also already started sharing it with principals. And next week, for example, in the principals meeting, both Dr. Brown and myself are presenting this specific presentation and the components to principals, so they also have an opportunity to share it with their faculty. While there are good things in the bill, there are also some significant implications, and it's important, as you say, that the system understands what are the requirements and how we're intending to comply. Yeah.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you very much. I do not see any other lights, so we will move on with our agenda. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is open forum for non-agenda items. Ms. Benjamin, do we have any cards? Okay. Next on our agenda, Superintendent's report. Dr. Cavazos.
Thank you, President Mays. And so our Explore AISD event was a success last month with over 500 families that came to the Career Tech Center to explore our specialized programs and our high school programs. So I want to thank all the staff at the Career Tech, our communications staff and principals, et cetera, that came out to demonstrate the things that are happening at their schools. Our Parent and Community Engagement Department continues to host luncheons, making sure that our community is informed and engaged in the things that are going on. We've had a pastoral luncheon, a civic and nonprofit, a realtors association, et cetera, for presentation of our bond program that's coming up. So I appreciate them and their efforts on that. I was able to visit Fitzgerald Elementary staff recently for their outstanding performance. As you know, Fitzgerald Elementary is really on the top of their performance with an A rating, and this is a team effort, and it's a great demonstration of excellence. And we know that the rating means one thing, but what's really important is the way this staff works together to make sure every student is successful at Fitzgerald, and they do it in their own fashion, their own way, and it's a really special team of teachers and staff. So. Finally, Goodman Elementary celebrated its 50th birthday recently with an evening of outdoor. They were outdoor, and so those of you who came, you know that it was really outdoor. I want to commend Dr. Rice for keeping the tie on. I couldn't do it. So, but Goodman has built a wonderful, thriving community, outstanding participation, the staff, the kids. That young man wanted me to get away from his ducks there. Those were his, I guess, but I insisted. So. Certainly happy to be part of that, and we had a great time, but it was certainly outdoors. So, but thank you, Goodman and the staff, for putting that together for our community. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Cavazos. Also enjoyed listening to the mariachi band that showed up from Sam Houston. Any board members? School reports? Activity reports? Okay, seeing no lights. Ms. Secretary, do we have any items to consider?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm still reeling over Dr. Works' stuff. I mean, no, ma'am, we do not have any.
Thank you. When you wake up in the middle of the night, go, House Bill 3. It is going to work out. It is going to work out. Right. So the Board of Trustees on October the 3rd, beginning at 9:05 p.m., will convene in closed session pursuant to sections 551.071 through 551.084 of the Texas Government Code in accordance with the Texas Open Meeting Act for the topics set forth in our agenda. Thank you very much.